Welcome, everybody, to a special edition of Bases Loaded right here on OTF. Doing it on Thursday since the regionals start tomorrow, fellas. I'm Blake Munroe, joined weekly by Jeff Howe and CJ Vogel. And we're going to obviously talk about the regional. But first, guys, let's talk about the storm damage yesterday. That seems to be the hot topic going into today. And CJ, Jeff, you're both down there. We talked to CDC a little bit ago as well, but things still on track despite that storm damage. As you can see in the picture I have here on the screen that CJ you took a moment ago, they're getting it going, man. And Bobby talked to CDC just a few minutes ago, and he said that as of right now, everything's still on plan to get it going and for them to play tomorrow down there at Dish Falk.
Yeah, it was pretty funny. So they're moving quick down there, Blake, at the Dish. You know, I was out there earlier this morning. This is the video I took. You didn't see a whole lot of the stilts, right? The foundation for center field wall, that batter's eye. We go in for a quick word with Jim Schlossnagel, Luke Harrison, and Jalen Flores. We come back out and there are stilts in the ground. They're getting ready to, put up some sort of fencing there. And will it be a true fence? Will it be a bit of a wind-breaking net? We'll see, but Texas at least familiar with having to replace a batter's eye in short notice. Obviously, last year when it folded in half, this year, obviously, it's completely gone. But Texas working, and I was told that there's no current plan to look elsewhere to host this regional. They're going to host it at the Dish. They're going to get this fence right, and they're going to make hay with what they have.
Yeah, I think this is probably as good a time as any, even in a pinch, to just do that thing right. And let's make sure that the monster doesn't have any issues going forward. But I'm in one of the suites at Dish Falk. I had to find a quiet place while UTSA is on the field practicing. But I mean, they're hard at work. CJ's pictures, that was kind of it's a nice, and I'll post some on my Twitter account and get some up on the site when I leave here in a little bit. But yeah, they haven't gotten any of the panels up yet, but they're lining them up, getting them ready to go. So I don't think there's going to be any issue with having some type of a batter's eye for this weekend.
Yeah, and real quick, Blake, before we move on, you see the Texas pitchers on the field. They went through a quick mound session with Max Rena earlier this morning. All four teams will be practicing Thursday afternoon. Texas gets the morning session, and then they're done for the afternoon. Here you see the pitchers on the field. No on-field batting practice, and I don't know if this will make a big difference given the backdrop of the Dish Falk field, right? Texas has played every home game there, so they're familiar with what's behind the mound. HCU, UTSA, they both played at the Dish already this year as well. But I do wonder if not having a backstop there, not getting a live pitch or a batting practice pitch session in before this regional might alter a little bit of what we see from opposing lineups going into this weekend.
That's a good question. Very good question. Well, we're going to get into this weekend here in just a moment. But first, I want to tell everybody about one of our sponsors. That's Chinook Seedery. Be sure to check them out online at chinookseedery.com, or you can go check them out in your favorite store. Of course, they got 8 delicious flavors to choose from, so I guarantee that you're going to find one that you like. Whether you're in the game or watching the game from the stands or couch, grab you a bag of Chinook. And fellas, the field is set. Of course, we had the live stream a couple of days ago, when we went over pretty much all of them. But let's look at this Austin Regional. Texas, of course, the top team in the Austin Regional, followed by UTSA at 2, Kansas State at 3, and then Houston Christian at 4. Texas will play Houston Christian tomorrow at 1 p.m. And guys, what are we thinking going into this?
For me, I think the most dangerous team, and I'll say this, and I know they've got to get by Kansas State first, but I feel like the most dangerous team in this field for Texas is going to be UTSA, not just because they're a 43-win team and beat Texas already once this year, but I think, Blake, you look stylistically at how they play. I think especially offensively, it lends itself to having success at Dish Falk. You start looking at UTSA, they're 10th in the country. They're top 10 team in the country in batting average, top 30 in doubles per game. Slugging, they're just outside of the top 50, 11th in on base percentage, 13th in scoring. So they'll get on base. They'll move around in the run game a little bit, but Their thing is about, get guys on base and then use the entire field to drive them in. They're not really a team that relies on the long ball. Kind of you think about a small ball team, kind of the way Texas has been traditionally. That's really how UTSA plays, and we know that Dish Falk was really designed for that style of play. So just stylistically, before you even get into talent or pitching matchups or anything like that, I feel like of the other three teams, it favors UTSA the most.
Yeah, Schlossnagel mentioned that in his availability also, Jeff. Just HCU, you can kind of throw into that conversation as well when you kind of look at it stylistically in comparison to some SEC teams. It'd be Oklahoma, it'd be Vanderbilt, some of these small ball schools that just like to put the ball on the ground and see what comes of it. So, yeah, UTSA obviously having the 12-inning win over Texas, I think they're coming in with some confidence. They got to see the Longhorns wrap up their practice. I don't know if they were as loose as what we saw from the Texas pitching staff on the field, Jeff, but there should be some quiet confidence from the UTSA side. And again, I think they'll travel well, just about an hour, 10 hour, 15 plus on the way up to the Dish this weekend.
CJ, did we figure out how many extra seats they added? I know you took a picture of it. I'm looking at it right now. They just put some temporary stands up down the third base concourse. I don't know how many extra seats that is. But, there's going to be a lot of two different shades of orange if it's a Texas UTSA matchup on Saturday.
Yeah.
And one thing that you got to think about for the Roadrunners, they have wins over two of the three teams they're facing this season. They, obviously we've talked about them beating Texas in the past, and then they've also won over Houston Christian. But you got to hand it to Coach Hallmark. Well, he was the conference, the AAC Coach of the Year. And guys, I was a little surprised to notice. I mean, number one, we know that they have a good RPI. They're number 25 in RPI, but they have a 77.2 win percentage, which is sixth among Division I teams. So I was a little surprised at that stat. I knew it was good. I didn't know it was that good.
Yeah, they're going to be a tough out. And fortunately for Texas, they've played a pretty tough schedule, right? So they're prepared for this. SEC is no different than what Texas will face going into, the super regional, what could be an Omaha run as well. Blake, what's going to be interesting to me is, and especially with UTSA, is Texas has seen a number of these big arms before, right? That was a big win for the RPI for UTSA, and they approached it as such going into that Tuesday night game at the Dish, right? Texas saw some of that big-time pitch arsenal out of that bullpen, out of that starting rotation for UTSA. I would imagine that gives Texas a bit of an advantage, just seeing a familiar arm on the field already, knowing what they can do. And I asked Schlossnagel a little bit, knowing that Texas sees a lot of pitches at the plate, do things change? Is that just something that's always going to be, part of the forefront approach at the plate in the postseason is working the count, seeing a lot of two-strike plate appearances? Said, look, we don't rarely ever give a true take sign. We want our guys to go up there looking for one pitch. If that pitch doesn't come, well, then they have to adjust and make hay with what they have at the plate. But very rarely will I tell them, a specific approach going up to the plate. Look for what they have tendency-wise in the pregame, go out there, execute, but maintain that same mindset of go in there looking for your pitch, a pitch you can drive, and see what you can do. No one comes to Texas looking to walk, Blake. That's what Schlossnagel told us, and I can't disagree with him.
Yeah, we're talking a lot. We'll talk about HCU. We talked a lot about UTSA, but let's not lose sight of K-State, man. I mean, Pete Hughes has gotten K-State 2 years ago. They were in the Super. They were in the regional last year. D. Kennedy, the former Longhorn, has actually had a really good year for them. Hitting 282 coming into the NCAA tournament. So that's a team that I don't think they're going to be intimidated by Dish Falk. I don't think they're going to be intimidated by Texas. So this is Schloss said it. And Blake, we talked about it on the live stream when the field of 64 got unveiled. Schloss said any four of these teams can win the regional, and that might sound like coach speak, but man, really, it wouldn't. I mean, Texas is going to have to put in some work over the next few days to get out of this and get to the supers. And I think that goes for all 16 of your regionals, the other 15. We'll get the odds in a minute too, but there are going to be some of these regional hosts, and I think a decent number of them that don't get out of this weekend, and their season's going to end and they won't be in a super regional.
All you really have to do, guys, look back to last year. K-State was the number 3 seed. They were in the Fayetteville Regional. They won the regional. So, I mean, they're in that same spot that they were last year. Of course, they have a good RPI as well, 37 RPI. Even their strength of schedule is 31. But the thing that gives me pause on K-State, they're 5-17 against quad 1 teams, 6-3 against quad 2. A little bit of an inconsistent offense. But then, like I said, I mean, we saw them last year, no one really giving them much of a chance. I mean, people respected them, don't get me wrong, but then they go in there and they win that Fayetteville Regional as the number 3 team in that regional. So I'm sure they're wanting history to repeat itself.
And also, we know to succeed at Dish Falk, you got to pitch well, you got to play really good defense. When you're 188 in the country in fielding percentage, that doesn't necessarily bode well for you advancing really far. So that's something K-State's got to get fixed.
Yeah.
On the flip side for Texas, we've seen the last 3 postseason runs come to an end because of errors to an extent, right? That's something that Texas playing at home, being familiar with the backdrops, the lighting, obviously the hops being on turf, I think it should play into their advantage. But hey, it bit Texas pretty hard in that SEC tournament as well against Tennessee. So that's got to be a point of emphasis for the Longhorns. They look sharp Thursday morning during their practice session, but you never know how things might bounce a different direction when the lights are on, everything's full speed. That has to be a key point for the Longhorns this weekend.
And then let's take a look at Houston Christian. Of course, as I said at the beginning, that's going to be the first game for Texas. 91 RPI, guys, and Coach Vanderland, it's his first season there, and they started out pretty strong in conference play, but then, the wheels came off a little bit. I was looking at their schedule earlier. They are 0-4 against Power 4 teams. Of course, we talked about that Texas loss where they lost to Texas 12-2, but the thing that would make me feel good if I'm Sloth and the pitching staff especially is those midweek pitchers that they saw feasted on them, and so I don't think you have to bring your ace in by any means on this first game of things unless things get out of hand. But it's going to be a tough task for Houston Christian, in my opinion.
Yeah, the big thing out of that game for me, looking back at it, Texas only struck out 4 times. And what's kind of been the overwhelming fact or kind of feel for this lineup recently is strikeouts have just hindered this lineup completely. And I had a fun stat for you guys last week I didn't get to read, but I will read it now. Over the last 10 SEC games for the Texas lineup, they struck out 128 times compared to just 62 hits. You do the quick math there, divide those numbers both by 10, and you're averaging 12.8 strikeouts per game to only 6.2 hits. That doesn't sound like a recipe for success. When Texas was really rolling early on in the season, when that lineup was seemingly stringing together rally after rally after rally, especially in clutch situations after going down in certain games, it wasn't because they were striking out. It was because they were putting the ball in play. That Houston Christian game specifically, 12 runs on the board in a 7-inning ball game. Sign me up, right? But a lot of that stems from only striking out 4 times, putting the ball in play, and making sure that you're not walking back to the dugout empty-handed. So that's got to be the key for me for this Texas lineup. And Schloss mentioned this morning as well, hate to go back to what he said, but it's pretty impactful. He said, we got into our hitters this weekend. We made it known that they've got to be better. The lineup feels that they need to be better. Now, of course, let's hope that they're not pressing at the plate because that can only, snowball downward as well. But there's been a point of emphasis, and I'm gonna be eager to see how aggressive they are at the plate this weekend, and rather than stretching those pitch counts and working those 2-strike accounts.
Well, a lot of familiarity when it comes to Texas and most of these teams. Of course, if we were in the Big 12, we could say that about Kansas State. But CJ, you actually sent me this clip, and I want to play it. Sloss talking about these other teams and watching them a little bit.
I don't know if anything comes to those particular games, but, because one single game in baseball can be such an outlier. But we certainly follow those teams. I watched when we weren't playing this weekend. I was watching UTSA, I think, against Tulane or somebody down in Florida when they were playing their tournaments. I was trying to just watch the game itself. But everything else these days comes off of True Media and Synergy, the video partners that we have. So we'll break all that down. But it is, having played 2 of the teams, I don't want to say it lessens the work because you don't want to assume anything, but you're certainly more familiar with it when you go back and look like, oh, yeah, this is how we played this guy. And has he really changed? Oh no, he has changed a little bit. We need to adjust how we're going to defend him, or maybe look for some things, more trends lately. But yeah, it's I would say it's lessened the work just a little bit. But what you present to the team, I mean, this is way more about how we play versus what the other team does. So the beauty of our league is there's a lot of different styles of play. So a Kentucky, a Vandy, Oklahoma is going to be super similar to UTSA, Houston Christian. They put the ball on the ground a fair amount. Kansas State's kind of in the middle from what I've seen. So we're well prepared, and these guys are ready to go.
And I thought that was interesting. And I think it's interesting that, 3 of the 4 teams have all played each other this season.
Now, when I look at Houston Christian, Parker Edwards is a two-way guy. He'll hit and he'll pitch for them. Jack Walker is a name you need to know, the son of Todd Walker, who, you go back to the 90s, might not have been a better middle infielder in college baseball in the 1990s than Todd Walker at LSU. And then, Rhett Hendricks is the guy that kind of sets the table for them, hitting 327, got a 933 OPS. So, they've – and Schloss gave a lot of props to Coach Vanderland. He said, no disrespect to what Houston Christian has going on out there, and I'm paraphrasing, but considering the resources he has to have the kind of year they've had, especially where the program was when he took it over, Schloss called him a kind of a rising star in the coaching industry, called him a superstar. So he's got a really good program. But yeah, I think everybody anticipates this is going to be a Texas UTSA winners bracket game on Saturday. And, from there, we'll see what happens. I do think, the unknown for Texas as we sit here right now and record this, but the good thing is it doesn't matter who starts that game on Friday. Luke Harrison's going to be in that Saturday role like he's been all year. And I think for him, one of the good things that came out of getting eliminated early in the SEC tournament, we know by the national seeding, there was nothing Texas could have gained other than maybe locking up the number 1 overall seed coming out of Hoover. But I think just to get Luke Harrison a rest, a reset, and get him recharged and ready to go for the postseason, he's been your most consistent starting pitcher throughout the year. And CJ, we heard Schloss talk about this. If Jared Spencer was healthy, it would make everything as far as your pitching plan go a lot easier. You really have a firm grasp on what you're doing. But without Spencer, on top of the fact that Ruger Riojas struggled for the last few weeks coming into this thing, and I think it was good for him to not pitch in Hoover and to get some time off and to get recharged. It's put everything kind of in flux, but let's not get it twisted, man. We know the job Max Weiner's done with this pitching staff. We know Texas has enough arms. It's just how will said arms be used and deployed, and in what order are they going to go this weekend?
Well, before we look at these odds, guys, I need to tell everyone about our other sponsor. And if you're an avid fisherman who's always searching for the right supplies, then you need to do yourself a favor and check out tackleaddict.com. It's owned and operated by former Longhorn Brian Robinson and former Longhorn baseball great Brandon Belt. Tackle Addict has everything you need for the best in today's fishing equipment, and it's for the everyday fisherman and serious pros alike. Get their product shipped to you directly from the shores of Lake Sam Rayburn. That's Tackle Addict, ADDICT.com. And Brian and Brandon say hook home. Well, I did some digging this morning and found some odds here. So Austin regional odds, Texas, no surprise here, guys. Longhorns are the overwhelming favorite to walk away with this, followed by UTSA, then Kansas State, and then Houston Christian way down the list at plus 4,000. Of course, Texas is a minus 270 on that one. So I don't think there's any surprise with those. I'm sure both of y'all agree. I was a little surprised, however, at the super regional. Texas still the favorite, plus 105, UCLA plus 250. And then UC Irvine, who, Jeff, you and I earlier in the week picked to probably upset UCLA, is down a little ways at plus 650. UTSA's right there, plus 650. Arizona State, plus 850. And then Kansas State down there at the bottom, plus 1,300. Poor Houston Christian, they didn't even get mentioned. And then College World Series winner. I was a little surprised at this one as well. I kind of felt like Texas might be down the list a little bit. But the fifth best odds, guys, Arkansas number 1, LSU 2, Vanderbilt 3, North Carolina 4. Texas 5, and then Tennessee had the 6th best odds. But any surprises to you guys? What do y'all think about those odds?
Not so much for me. Look, Texas again. Let's not lose sight that they're the number 2 seed in this entire thing, right? So the regional, the super regional, they should be a favorite. They should be heavy favorites. minus 270 to get out of their own regional. I think that's probably fair. I do like that value on UTSA though. I mean, if there's not going to be somebody that isn't Texas to get out of the regional, UTSA makes the most sense. Plus 300, that's pretty good value. But moving forward, look, and I want to go back to winning it all because Texas, the number 2 seed, as I mentioned. So to get to Omaha right now, it all makes sense. They're the favorite. You get to Omaha and you see they have the 5th best odds against big time SEC opponents over the last month or so. Texas hasn't been good, right? Those last 10 games, they've been 3-7 against SEC foes. They're trying, and you mentioned Ruger Riojas, maybe trying to get back to his old self, some extended time off for most of the bullpen, for most of those arms. I'm sure they're thinking the same thing. And I think this week of just sitting back, kind of going back through the approach, some of those reading tendencies, if you will, for the Texas lineup, I think that's going to be key because they can't be striking out, as I mentioned, 16 times per game. That's just going to be a quick postseason for the Longhorns. If they get that right, there's value there for the Horns.
You got to get to Sunday unscathed. That is the big thing in this regional. You can't mess around getting in the losers bracket. I've seen it too many times in my time covering college baseball. I've seen plenty of regional hosts. You'll win the first game against that team coming from a 1-bid league that in some instances they're just happy to be there. But if you losing that Saturday game is such a gut punch because you've used your 2 best starting pitchers by that point, or at least your best starter has been used by that point. You probably used your best bullpen guys trying to win that Saturday game. And the longer that thing goes, your guys are going to be tired. You got to turn around and play the early elimination game on Sunday. So losing that Saturday game is such a punch to the gut and really gets you behind the 8 ball. So I think for Texas, as good as this team is, I don't think Texas – there are very, very few teams in the country right now that have the pitching depth to come out of the losers bracket and win a regional. But, Blake, can you put those Omaha odds up real quick? It doesn't – I don't think that's any slight to Texas because I think you look at those 6 teams right there, Arkansas, LSU, Vanderbilt, North Carolina, Texas, and Tennessee. Arkansas, LSU, and Tennessee, I think you can, kind of go Rochambeau, rock, paper, scissors, whatever, between those 3 teams as the most talented team in the country. I think Vanderbilt right now is the hottest team in the country. I think they're playing the best baseball of anybody heading into the postseason. I think North Carolina, how they weren't a top 4 seed blows my mind. I thought they should have been a top 4 seed, but, whatever. That's why I'm sitting here and I wasn't on the selection committee. But I think North Carolina and Texas probably had the best bodies of work maybe of anybody in the country. When you just look at start to finish, those resumes, they're really, really strong. So, yeah, I think we've talked about it all year, guys. This is one of those years in college baseball. There's not a team like Tennessee or Texas A&M last year. Damn sure in a team like we saw with LSU 2 years ago with Skeens and Cruz and Tommy Tanks. There's not that one team that you look at and say, man, they are the team to beat. Any of those 6 teams, I think, can go win a national championship. And it's even deeper. I think there's probably realistically, about probably 8 to 12 teams this year that you can look at and say, yeah, I could see them winning the national championship. The good thing, though, guys, as we sit here right now, Texas is definitely in that 8 to 12 team mix of you wouldn't be surprised to see them be the last team standing in Omaha.
So I'm going to ask you all this, and I think we should do this every week until the season ends. I mean, I showed you the top 6. Who's your underdog pick to win it all? If you had to pick one, and who's your normal pick to win it all?
Oh, well, starting with the normal pick, typically I'd say Arkansas, right? They're the number 1 seed. They're the favorite, if you will, going off of those odds. They have the best lineup in the country in my eyes, SEC Player of the Year, but it's still Arkansas. And Arkansas and Omaha, they don't mesh. Even with the great nickname that they have with the Omahawks, it just doesn't mesh. Something always goes wrong with Arkansas. Could this be the year? We'll see. But my underdog, I'm going out to that coastal region, whoever comes out of it, because I think it's very stacked. That team will be riding high, whoever it might be. And I'm thinking that's the team that could make a deep run in this postseason. That coastal region's up to all 4, really 3. But I'll rock with that.
Jeff?
Look, as far as who I like to win it all, I speak hook 'em. So until Texas is done, I'm riding with the Longhorns. That's just how I roll. I love college baseball. I grew up loving Texas baseball. So, I mean, honestly, this rivals, the early part of football season is my favorite time of the year when you talk about the road to Omaha. As far as an underdog pick, given what I just said is going to sound sacrilegious, I wouldn't look too far past Oklahoma because I think for two reasons. One, when you've got the Witherspoon brothers and you're leading your rotation, especially Kyson, those two are good enough to get you through a regional or a super and get you to Omaha. And they're going to have the benefit of, I guarantee you, when they get their first game in the regional, now watch me say this and OU goes 2 and barbecued, but I think it's going to be eye-opening for them, especially their bullpen guys who are like, hey, we're not facing an SEC lineup where 1 through 9, anybody can make you pay. Like, there are some teams out here that are human. So I think Oklahoma, if I was going to go for a non-Texas pick, I feel like North Carolina, maybe they're looking at not getting in the top 4 as a snub, but I would go with North Carolina and then that dark horse right now. And maybe it's just because I've seen them recently. I would say Oklahoma. And plus, you don't want the Sooners to win it, but hey, man, I'll pull for Skip Johnson when they're not playing Texas. So I don't pull for Oklahoma. I pull for Skip Johnson. There is a distinction. So no, I'd like to see Skip make another run.
Well, to your point, Oklahoma way down the list, plus 9,500 odds to win it all. So that truly is an underdog pick. I'll give you that. As far as mine, I think right now, I mean, we've said it. Who's playing the hottest baseball in the country right now? Vandy. And that's who I'm going to go with as my pick. Of course, I want Texas to win it all, obviously, before anyone starts sending me hate mail. And then for my underdog, I think I said this on Monday when we were on that live stream, Jeff. Florida was only a couple wins away from having a top, from getting a seed. And I think they're getting hot at the right time, too. So I'm going to go Florida with my underdog pick. But, man, yours is truly – I'm blown away by that one. I got to say, I did not expect Oklahoma to come out of your mouth. I got to hand it to you. That's going out on a limb, man.
Going against the grain a little bit with the Sooners. But I'll tell you this with Florida, they're going to be really hard to beat in this format because, especially in a regional, if they start out 2-0 and if you get to Sunday – you're going to try to eliminate them, try to beat them twice when one of those games you've got to face Aiden King. Yeah, Florida's going to be a really, really tough out in this deal.
Yeah, and they're up at that coastal region up in Conway. Look, they're the favorites, minus 110 to come out of that region, even over Coastal, who will be the host, East Carolina, plus 1,000 as well. So I love that regional. I said the winner of it would be my long shot. Florida might just be it, but I'm not sleeping on my Chanticleers, baby.
How's that for Coastal, right? Like the Sun Belt, you get a couple of hosts like, hey, you had a great season. By the way, now we're going to give you by far the toughest regional draw of any of these 16 hosts. Good luck.
Oh, man. Well, we will be back probably not the same time. I don't know how we're going to do that next week. Stay tuned. We'll give you on how that's going to work next week. But we'll definitely be back next week one way or another. So for Jeff Howe and CJ Vogel, I'm Blake Munroe, and we'll see you then.